And now, here's your host, Alexandra Torresani.
I am over the moon excited that Lexi is joining emotional support for a second time. And I think what's uber special about this episode is that you're pregnant and last time I was pregnant. So we have like a role reversal. So this is just really fun and I can't thank you enough. How far along are you? You're 37 weeks?
6.
36
Yeah,
weeks.
well, 36. I think it was, 36 yesterday. I don't know. I feel like, it's a moving target.
It's a moving target. Things could happen at any moment. So I'm just so happy that you like squeezed this in before because I know that time is so precious when you're about to give birth. And you also have another one at home who is like lady's love of her life, Luca. I mean, he is
So
just
cute.
such a gorgeous. He's like not even real. I can't even explain him. So everyone needs to follow Lexi just so they can see how gorgeous he is. But I'm so excited because we're
Honestly.
here to talk about your new venture that you have going on. And as you know, the podcast kind of has turned into more of maternal mental health. Like, yeah, we have sporadic people that will come on and talk about, mental illness and mental wellness and what we can do for our self-care. But specifically, I've been just following my own journey and you just started this new venture and I was like, we need to talk about this because more moms need to hear about this because this was something that was lacking in my life. So on a side note, for those who have not listened to our past episode, I'm going to say put a pause on this, go back to our other episodes so you can hear Lexi kind of talk about what her past lives were. But for a quick little roundup for those who maybe did listen to that, give a little backstory of what you are, not what you are. We know what you are. You're a pregnant woman right now. Who you are and kind of how you've gotten to this place currently, and we can then get into the next stage of Lexi.
Yeah, so thank you first and foremost for even having me here. I am so
course.
grateful just for you and our friendship and kind of all of the things that we've kind of become over the years.
Yeah.
It's been really fun. And like when we first found each other, we were both having podcasts
Yeah.
and starting and like had businesses and we were successful in those businesses too and those ventures and you as an actress.
On a side note, when you started your podcast, were you pregnant at the time? You were not, right?
No, I wasn't.
So that
Yeah,
was like a
no.
totally different like stage of Lexi too. Like this was just you doing a wellness podcast talking about gut health and talking about how we can take care of our physical bodies.
Totally.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, it's kind of one of those things where I love us as women
Yeah.
because we actually are forced to change truly,
Every
especially
day.
when we become parents. Yeah, exactly. It's like we don't have midlife crises. We just have like every 5 to 10 years, it just is what it is.
Yes, like
Which is
5 to 10 years, I would say 5 to 10 minutes. It's like a crisis.
yeah,
Like
actually that's totally fair. But like thinking about what we were like what pre-pregnancy, even like pre-postpartum, like we were completely different
Oh my gosh.
individuals, 100%.
And I feel like you hear it a lot where they're like, oh, you have to mourn your past self. But I don't think that it's talked about enough to the point where you really truly need to do some sort of ceremony or some sort of closing chapter to that life that I'm not saying that you change so much as a person, but you grow as a person, right? It's not like you're like you have to like mourn that person because you'll never be that person again and it's going to be awful. No, you're just going to be a different version of that person. And so I feel like that's not talked about enough, like where you literally need to go and like have that 5 minutes of a meditation to yourself to really mourn the changes that are coming. And I think you can't even warn someone of the changes until they go through them because you never know how crazy and difficult it really is.
No, and you're right. And people can warn you. And yeah, basically, I guess, long story short, I'll just summarize it. I mean, I guess actually, I want to ask you a question.
Oh, yeah.
So how would you summarize your postpartum journey if you could in like 3 words?
In 3 words. Life shattering, Um, traumatic. And then I would say gorgeous.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know
totally
why I
fair.
like those words, but that's just kind of I feel like that was the stage of what I would say. Like it was life shattering. Like I had a baby. It was traumatic because like I hemorrhaged and I was going through trauma and postpartum anxiety, and then gorgeous because it was such a moment that you can't even explain unless you've been a parent, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And it's so funny because you can do all of the prep work.
What were the 3 words you would explain? I mean, you would describe.
Yeah, I would say vulnerable
Oh,
is
yeah.
first and foremost. I was just so vulnerable all the time. And as someone who is actually a very confident person,
Yeah.
just generally, and felt very stable. Like I'm a
Sure.
Capricorn, I have like all like that grounding energy.
Yeah.
I really felt super vulnerable just by everyone's emotions, by anything going on around me. I definitely had to train myself to wear this magical protective cloak
Right, right,
every day to like
right.
kind of like get all of the opinions and the anxieties and things like that.
Yeah.
And training myself to do that took kind of a long time.
Sure.
And then knowing like when to be able to take that off and be like, okay, Lexi, like you're gonna have a moment to
Yeah.
yourself and you're gonna be able to reflect on your day and then
Yeah.
no one else's anxieties are gonna affect you.
No, it's
And
so
that was
true.
really challenging. Um,
Yeah.
because I think that that's like probably one of the first and foremost things that people don't realize is that no matter how strong they are, you are in a vulnerable state for a pretty long period of time. Like I don't think postpartum actually
It's way
ends.
longer than 6 weeks. Like, I just wanna let every mom know that, and I feel like it's
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you can help me with this. I feel like when I meet moms who are pregnant, like, I have a couple of moms right now who are pregnant for their first times. I have a lot of second-time moms like you and a couple other friends, but a lot of first-time moms, and they're doing all the work. Like, they're the most amazing, like,
Great.
pregnant moms I've ever met in my life. I'm like, "Oh my god," like, "Wow," like, "You're really ahead of it," you know? And in the best way possible and doing all the like just great work. Like I could be more proud of them. But there's also this moment where I don't want to scare a new mom and be like, "Oh, it's
Hmm.
going to be fucking out of control." But I always say like if you can get through the first 12 weeks with a baby, you can get through anything because that's when you could have a colicky baby. Like you could have a baby like Lady where she would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And then we found out it was acid reflux. Like there were things like that. It wasn't just because she wanted to poop or she needed to clean or she was hungry. Like it wasn't because of that. Like it was, there was actually like a physical issue. Right. And I think if you
Yeah.
can get through those first 12 weeks, like your mind is going to be so much happier and your sleep is going to get better and then they get the regression and all that. But how do you say to a mom who's pregnant, like a new parent, or even a dad, or even someone that's adopting, like anyone, how do you say to them without scaring them, like, it's going to be the craziest ride of your life for the first 3 months, but then it should be a little bit easier? Like, how do you do it without being like, ooh, like, here, I'm going to like scare you and I'm going to give you the fear factor?
I think you just did a really great job. Truly. I think you just did. I think that I would want someone to be super upfront with me. And I think that's the thing that really affects a lot of people once they go into that postpartum
Sure.
period is that they don't know because everyone sugarcoated it for them.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that it's okay to be a little bit real and raw about the experience and also kind of tell them like for me like and I guess I didn't even say this, but like I really do focus on like postpartum
Yeah.
coaching and it doesn't really just stop at like 12
Right.
weeks. It really kind of begins like at least your self journey
Yeah.
begins kind of around like 12
Yeah.
weeks because at the first 12 weeks you're really focusing on baby. I mean, you should really be focusing on yourself a lot if you can too,
Sure.
getting proper nutrition, balancing your hormones, all of those kinds of things. And I do a lot of that just because I was obviously a health
Right.
coach. Now I focus even more so on
Right.
hormones just because I realized how big they were and they were always a big factor in gut health coaching as well. But when you go through that hormonal drop
Mm.
after you have a baby, knowing what you're supposed to be eating, knowing what the first 40 days are supposed to be like with regards to feeding your body, making sure your partner's on the same level, making sure you're having the right help or the right like emotional
Right.
registry is what I call like people in your
Oh,
corner
I love
that
that.
you can ask. And that's what you can do is be like, it's gonna be really hard. You're gonna not be able to figure out a lot of things, but you also like are human, and motherhood is not like some perfection type
No.
instance. Like there's no perfection in motherhood, just zero.
Yeah.
And so if you can let go of that, because we do have a lot of perfectionists among us, especially in the millennial generation,
Yeah.
because we've been taught that we can do it all. And to be honest, we probably could do it all when we were by
Sure.
ourselves, but now we're adding another human being into this equation, and we're still in that mentality that we can do it all. And behind closed doors, all those people that you see that are doing it all on social media,
Oh, it's all lies.
they have so much help,
Yeah.
or they're crying in the bathroom on the floor and they're just not
Right.
showing that part of
Right.
it.
Right.
And
There's
so,
it's not all like peaches and cream. Like it's definitely not. And I know, and I have to, and I think that that's why, it's funny, like TikTok, I talk about it a lot, how TikTok and Reddit, like two of the worst things probably for your brain, helped me so much with my postpartum and with my pregnancy, because no one was really talking about in blog posts, no one was talking about, doctors weren't fucking talking about it, or like what it was like to be bipolar and pregnant, or what it was like
yeah,
to deal with postpartum anxiety. Like I remember I went to my doctor postpartum, and like he didn't even believe that I was like bleeding enough where like I like was like, "Oh, I really need help." I was like, "Dude, I was in the hospital at Cedar Sinai, 10 days postpartum." And then I remember, I mean, it's like very graphic, but I remember it was a moment where he was like, "Oh, are you really bleeding?" Like it could just be normal. And I remember it was like weeks afterwards. And I remember I pulled my pants down, like so grim. And like there was like so much blood. And he like went white, and he was like, "Okay, we need to do an emergency DNC right now. Like, feed your baby right now and then hand her to your mom, because you're not going to be able to feed her for 24 hours." And I'm like, What?" You know, and I was like, God, isn't it crazy how like doctors don't even believe you? Like, this is your job. Like,
yes.
and so I think that that's what you have to just always speak up. You have to have no, shame of like being like, well, like I should just listen. Like, no, if you don't feel right, if you're not feeling good, if your hormones are off, if things are not great, sometimes it does take reading into, other people. Like I really feel like the best thing I did was Googling, "Hey, I'm, 13 weeks pregnant. And I live with bipolar disorder. Anyone else dealing with symptoms?" And a lot of Reddits came up. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying they
And
were all
you
great,
found,
but I
no,
found a
but you found
community.
community.
Yeah.
You found community that way, which
Yep.
was honestly, and that's kind of why I started Circle, is truly, it's more so, and it's like obviously a subsidiary of Confidence, which obviously is like supplements that I was doing before. But really, one of my most favorite things I've ever done in my life is curating groups of people.
Yeah.
It's just so fun, and I get so much fulfillment out of it.
Yeah.
And being able to organize things of people while they're pregnant, which I just
Right.
started doing, and then also in their postpartum journey, is just really, really, really amazing. I think for people who are going through very similar
Right.
instances, and then they're able to have conversations with people who are going through it with them. And sometimes it's nice to have it with people who are newer friends, because
Yes.
sometimes you don't talk about that stuff with your friends, and
Sure.
sometimes there's a vulnerability gap because like maybe one of you guys doesn't want to talk about it. Seems like, I mean, obviously you and I seem like we would definitely have those difficult conversations with each other. But sometimes, like you said, like if it's your, yeah, if it's your really good friend, like maybe you're like, you don't want to tell them like the scary stuff because you don't
Yes.
want to scare them, or you have hesitations and things like that, which I think is completely fair because maybe you know them better than ever than anyone.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just forget to tell really close people in your life like how they can help you. like
Right,
that kind
right,
of stuff. So,
right.
for example, if you have someone who is gonna go through like the first 12 weeks, be like, hey, could I come over? Like, when's the hardest like hour for you? Could I come over during that time and help you? Or
Right.
could I just come and drop off food outside your door? And if you're able or willing or want to at that point, no pressure at all. I'm happy to come in and hold your baby while you take a shower. Like things like that are like really easy. Like thinking about like creating like a chores list for people when they come over, so it's not just like a, oh, can I hold your baby while you like sit and hover and not really sure
Oh
what to
my
do.
God. Can I tell you the hardest thing was, and I talk about this with literally every friend, every stranger, when you have, parents or family members or, parent in laws, that come to visit and they just want to hold the baby. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But like at 1 week to postpartum, 2 week postpartum, 3 week postpartum, most likely that baby wants a boob and wants to sleep on the mom. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of like if we're talking about if like you yourself birthed this baby, like that, I'm just going to speak from my experience. Like, that's what
yeah,
it was. And like having family come over where they just wanted to sit and hold the baby and take pictures and just be with the baby. I'm like, hi, like, I need to watch you when you're holding my baby because I have such severe anxiety right now that I'm
yeah,
afraid that you're going to suffocate my child the way that you're holding it or you're going to drop it. And so I don't feel safe enough to like go and hop in a shower right now. Like, I need a break. I need you to do the dishes. I need you to make
yeah,
me food. I need you to, I shouldn't be the one having to like plan everything for you, So I feel
yeah,
like that's such a great thing. Like, if someone comes over, even do it when you're pregnant, write a to-do list of like, here's like the 5
yes,
chores that I know I'm going to need. I'm going to need you to do the dishes, do the laundry, pick up, maybe my, vitamins or medication or, house supplies and like have that there. And so anytime someone comes over, be like, hey, there's a board. This is what I need,
exactly.
or, a meal train or, hey, if you come over
Yeah,
to
but be
the house,
precise with your meal
bring
train. Make sure you
be
have all
very
the things that you
precise.
actually want on it because otherwise it's gonna be a bunch of crap.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not going to be yummy. Or be like, hey, if you come over to the house, can you just bring, waters? These are what we need. Just something, and it's so frustrating because
Totally.
I think a lot of us, and I'm going to speak for myself, like you want to be like very nice to your family that's coming to visit, like whomever it may be or friends. But at some point it's like, I remember I was such a fucking bitch the first
Oh
like
yeah.
12 weeks postpartum
Mm-hmm.
because people would just like come over and just like hang out like family and I'd be like, hi, that's not what this is about. Like, I'm not
No.
here to cater to you right now. Like, I'm going through so much stress and so much anxiety and you can't understand that. So like, if you can't show up and do the dishes, you gotta go. Like, you got
Yep.
and I remember like people are like, wow, that's really tough. I'm like, I just don't care, because I think once you have
Yeah.
a kid, your kid comes first, right? And then everything else changes.
Exactly. Exactly. No, you're so right. And it's funny because a lot of people want to include their family. And even like as a recovering people pleaser,
Yeah.
I literally want to include everyone. I truly did. I was like, okay, great. Like, I'm going to come back from the hospital. I'm going to have like 2 days. And then like my in laws are going to come. And then I'm going to have like 5 days. And then my parents are going to come. And I was like, getting up, going on walks, doing all that kind of stuff like pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I had this conversation with my husband, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I am not going to get out of bed for 5 days
Yeah.
after I have this baby. Like,
Yeah.
I might get up a little bit, but I don't want to feel like I'm forced, and
No.
I won't. And he's like, and then the next 5 days, I'm going to maybe like get up for like 30 minutes at a
Yeah.
time. Like, that's it. And then
That's it.
the next 5 days, I'll like be around the apartment and maybe I'll go on a walk, but like, I'm not leaving like the house probably
No.
for 10 days unless I want to like sit outside and get vitamin D if
Yeah.
the sun's out. But that's pretty much it. Like, I am not going to move
No.
because I now know myself because like it's one of the most athletic events. I like to call it athletic because it
I
is
love
probably the
that.
most athletic event um, of your life. And it's so challenging. And just like when you run like a marathon or you do any kind of crazy activity like that, you need to be super rested afterwards. You
Yeah.
fall asleep for how long? And guess what? After you have a baby, it's basically unacceptable to be able to do that because you now have this child
Yeah.
who is feeding off of you and you're going to be sleepless. And so,
Yeah.
how can you figure out how to rest, but also take care of
Yeah.
this baby? And it's like, for 5 days, I'm going to need you, Logan, or a postpartum doula or whoever it is to bring me all of my meals, all of my tonics. Here they are in an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. And I appreciate you and I love you. And this is what you're doing for me for bringing our child into the world.
No, and I love that. And speaking of bringing your child into the world, what for those who are so curious and like want to know what it's like, you're going to have a water birth for your second birth.
Hmm.
What was your experience in your first birth that made you choose to do a water birth the second? And are you, and let me preface this. As everyone knows, I did hypnobirthing. I'm very like woo
Hypnobirthing.
woo, right? We're very woo woo like this. And there was even a moment for me where I was petrified to do a water birth or like think about doing a home birth because I'm like, what if scenario? And then of course my worst, thing came true where I hemorrhaged and I almost died, all that stuff, So like, what is it like? I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just like,
No,
what was
no.
it for you? Because you've experienced it before. What was it that could give the confidence to someone else or maybe offer that choice to go with a water birth?
Yeah. So I had a
Or a home birth. I
very
don't want to say water
home
birth,
birth,
like a home
home
birth.
birth. Yeah. No worries. A home birth. Yeah.
I
So
imagine you like at the like San Diego Wild Animal Park, like there, like and you're like, oh my God, like take me to the water, take me to the ocean. I know.
I'd be open to it. Oh my
I'd be
gosh.
down.
There's like, yes.
If it was at Disney World, I'd be down. I'm gonna be honest. I would totally
I
do it at
mean,
Disney
we have the
World.
Queen of Disney among us at the moment. Yeah. So I had a very uncomplicated birth at the hospital and I was unmedicated. And that was my goal basically of the birth. And I didn't push my husband on doing something like a home birth. I basically said, could we do a birthing center potentially? And there just weren't any birthing centers close enough to
Right,
us when we wanted to do it for the
right.
first time. So I just kind of was like, whatever, I will do a hospital birth. I
Sure.
loved my doctor. He was great. And I still have a really good relationship with him. And he actually backs my midwife that I'm using currently.
Wow,
So if I do
fabulous.
have something that's gonna go, awry,
If something
he
were to
will be
happen, you do
there.
have a backup, which is fabulous. And I think that that's super
Correct. I
important.
mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, I think if something's like really, really happening and it
Sure.
is somewhat rare that you'd have to have like a super big emergency,
Right.
you'd go to the closest hospital, which I probably don't think that I would have him. I would just be like at UCLA, which is literally like 1 minute
Yeah.
away from me.
Right.
So still fine. But you also have your midwife who
Yeah.
is a trained professional in birthing,
Right.
quite literally. And for you, from a hemorrhaging standpoint, if that was the case and they noticed that, like after you gave birth, they have all the medications to do that. They have Pitocin in order to be able to prevent you from hemorrhaging. They have that kind of stuff, and they're very much so in tune and they listen to you. I think much more explicitly, they spend time with you afterwards. So, like, the midwife is there for like 3 to 4 hours after you deliver.
Wow.
And so it's a lot different than the doctor kind of coming, delivering the baby, making sure everything's fine, and then kind of like exiting and maybe checking on you like a day or two later when you're in the
Sure.
hospital, which has definitely been my experience. Obviously, you have all these nurses everywhere who are kind of flipping schedules and things like that continuously who are checking on you.
That was like the most stressful part. I remember
Oh yeah.
like I don't plan on having another baby, but if I had another baby, I think my biggest fear would not be the hemorrhaging. It would not be any of that. It would be the after the postpartum care because it just felt like I was in a jail. And I was just like, we also went from being in this like beautiful, like suite, which was gorgeous. I had views of the Hollywood sign.
Yep.
Like it was amazing. And then
Yeah.
because I gave birth at an odd time, they literally were like, sorry, this is the only thing we have left. And it was like a closet.
Yeah.
And the door wouldn't even open completely, like you just scoot out. And I just remember
Totally.
being like, what happened? And I
Yeah.
remember counting the minutes till I could leave
Till you could
because I
leave.
just
Yeah.
was done, I was
Yes.
I
Oh,
was
my room
done.
was so small that the chair that Logan was sleeping in blocked the bathroom.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's
So
what I did too. Yes.
I couldn't even go to the bathroom
No.
like while he was sleeping. So
No.
I had to go
No.
out in the hallway and pee.
And I think what was also scary, which I always like to, which I don't always tell moms, and something that I forget about until like I have a conversation like this, is no one taught me how to breastfeed. No one said to me, like after I
Oh
gave
no.
birth, no one was like, hey, by the way, you should be trying to feed your baby every 2 hours. Like they were just like, okay, bye. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, do you think she's hungry? I'm like, I didn't know anything. And then I had an awful, everyone knows the story, but I had an awful woman that was like telling me I was like, killing my baby because I was starving her because I wasn't giving her boob. And I was like, wait, but I didn't know I
Oh
was
jeez.
ready. So like there were
Was this
certain things
one
that I
was this person
wasn't,
in the hospital?
this was in a hospital. Yeah. Yeah. And so and then I had a lovely nurse who recognized me from Big Bang Theories. Like there was, ups and downs throughout the, yeah.
Yeah. You'll have your ups and downs of nurses, I'll tell you that. Yeah, ups and downs. I'm
And so
like,
I had,
okay.
yeah, and then I had a lactation consultant that came in at the hospital who was lovely, and she was like, "Your baby's fine. Like, calm down. Like, people are pressuring
Yeah,
you."
yeah, yeah.
I was like, "Okay," but I remember being like, "I don't know what to do. Like, who is
Yeah, but
going to
someone
help me?"
coming in and telling someone so vulnerable and sleepless that like you're doing the wrong things. I remember someone was like, "Oh, you have like flat nipples." Basically, I don't care, TMI. Like at least
Yeah,
then, I mean, they're definitely not now that I've had a child.
yeah, yeah.
But she was like, "You have this. It's gonna be really challenging for you to breastfeed, like really challenging." And I was like, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate that." She's like, "So you would probably just like want to like start on the pump. So like you should try pumping like every 3 hours in the hospital to just to like see." And I'm like, woman,
What?
like, whatever. That was like one thing, and I was like, all right, like, thanks for your opinion. Like, I'll like wait for the lactation person to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like, the pressure of like, pressure to breastfeed, but then also pressure to keep the baby fed. So it's like, I want you to breastfeed, but I also think that maybe like the baby hasn't eaten. So maybe you should give him some formula. It's like all the things. It's like
All
so
the
many
things.
different opinions, and no one's on the same page
No,
who is a
no,
nurse who changes shifts every like 8 to 12 hours.
no.
And so it's definitely like a challenging time, I think, with all the energies that you're having
It's a
around
lot of
you,
energy, and you
especially in a
don't want your
vulnerable
baby
state.
around that energy. You're like, I just remember I was like, I just want to be home, and I started crying to Sturgis because I was like, I am
And by
so
the way,
done.
Alessandra, you can give birth in the hospital and literally check out.
Well, I was not told that. I was told that
I
I was
wasn't
stuck
either. And
there.
so my doctor literally had this conversation with me. I was like, I really didn't love the postpartum care at the hospital. I mean, I think that this time around, I probably would have a different experience because I know what to expect.
Yeah,
But with that all said and done, like if I was gonna give birth in the hospital, like a huge reason why is I wanted to just be home
yeah,
afterwards. Like so I
yeah.
could rest and I could do all the
Because
things
I
that I
couldn't
really wanted to
rest.
do to,
No.
yeah, can't rest at the hospital. It's impossible. Um, unless you like can actually get them to take your baby to the nursery, which like also like, do you want to do that? I don't know.
Oh
Like,
my God, I remember I was like, "Where are you taking my baby?" And I followed them into the nursery and I was like, "What are you doing to her? Like, what are you giving her? Like, no, don't do this." Like, and I
yeah,
remember just being like this crazy person. And I remember, COVID, it was 2022. So COVID wasn't fully like gone yet, but it was pretty
yeah,
gone, let's say.
yeah,
And so to the point where it was not like, they were taking every precaution and they were like, "You have to wear a mask." I was like, "Absolutely not." Like, I cannot, I'm not
yep.
breathing right
Did
now.
that
Like,
to me too.
sorry. Like, you tested me. I don't have it. We're fine. And I remember we were walking around, it was less than 24 hours and they were like, "Okay, you can take, lady for a little walk." Her name wasn't even lady yet. They're like, "You can take the baby for a walk around the floor," and I was like, "Okay." And I just remember blood like kept gushing and I'm so TMI, but I was like, "Oh my God, like I can't do this." Like it was a lot of work just to do that. But I remember I forgot to put my mask on when we were walking around. And this woman came out. She's like, "You need to have your mask on. Who do you think you are? You can't this isn't your house." And I just was like, "What?" And I didn't even like
Yeah,
remember that I didn't have it on. Do you know what I mean? I was just
so
like,
ridiculous,
what? Like, what
truly.
are you, it was so ridiculous. So that
You're
being
like, I
said,
just had a baby. I am
exactly.
immune compromised. I have a lot of things. I appreciate you saying, hey, honey, like, we want to make sure that your health is like in a good state. So we'd appreciate you wearing a mask because you are in like a vulnerable, like immune
Yes.
compromised state. Like that would be a nice thing to say to someone who just delivered a baby. But like, no, that's just
No,
not something that
no, and
anyone.
they just like turn it around like really fast. You know what I mean? And it's just
I
like,
got
oh
traumatized,
man.
yeah.
You chose to have this home birth. What is something that maybe someone who hears a home birth and is like, oh my God, that's so woo woo. Like, what is something that you can like reassure someone like this is the process, this is what it's going to consist of, and this is, why maybe it should be an option for you.
Well, a huge reason why I wanted a home birth was because of the care that is provided to the mom by the midwife
Yeah.
and a team of professionals, which is
Right.
amazing. So I would obviously still hire a doula, but they have usually an assistant who comes who usually is a trained doula as well. And so you get to go and meet with your midwife just as many times as you meet with your doctor,
Okay.
or sometimes more, but the appointments
Yeah.
are much longer.
Right.
You get to ask them all of the questions that you want. There isn't any like invasive, like constant checking of like, like
Sure.
ultrasounds and things like that, which honestly didn't bother me at all. Like I liked seeing the baby and move, but it's interesting how the midwife checks the baby versus how the doctor does. The
Wow.
midwife literally takes just like the basic equipment and like and literally just like, oh, do you want to listen to their heart and like finding their
Wow.
heart in
Yeah.
your belly. And
Wow.
so it was really interesting just because I learned like, oh, I know exactly what position the baby is in basically at all
Right.
times just from her kind of telling me and showing me like, oh, this is where his feet are right now. This is where his head is. And like just showing my belly, like giving like lots of positive love and affirmations to the
Wow.
baby every time they see them.
Oh,
Uh, talking you through all of your nutritional stuff. Like,
sure.
are you getting enough protein? Are you eating the things that are going to help you like keep your like skin less dry, like keep you
Right.
less constipated, all those kinds of things. Luckily, like I'm pretty well versed on that stuff, but it was just so nice to be able to have a secondary reference
Right.
of being able to talk through any of those things, which
Sure.
is definitely not talked about, I think, in a doctor's office. Like
Oh,
most often
no.
when I see my doctor, it's like a quick 5 to 7 minute thing, and he's great. Don't get me wrong, I love him, and I think he's fantastic. But you really do feel just like a little bit more of like a number. And then
You are.
I
Yeah.
came to the hospital. I came to my doctor, and I was like, "Well, I have a birth plan. Like, this is my
Yeah.
birth plan. This is what I'm thinking about doing." And you bring that to the hospital too, and you're sharing it
Sure.
with someone. But when you meet with your midwife, you're like, this is really what I want. This is my birth plan. And she is so focused on making sure that your birth plan is going the way that you want it
Right.
to. Obviously, you're not going to have it probably go exactly the way that you want it to. So you
No,
have to have a
and you
little
have
bit
to be
more
flexible. Yeah.
flexibility,
Yeah.
exactly,
You have to
across
be
the board.
flexible.
But, like, she honors that. She's like, "Oh, you would like a pool there, like, you would like to, like, have massaging or, like, things like that to help kinda, like, move through labor. You wanna have certain things that are, like, very important to you that
Mhm.
you want to happen during your birth, like dimmed lights, certain music, things like that." Like, your doula and your midwife and hopefully your partner, whoever else you want in the room with you, they're able to kind of, like, control that. Like, it's much more of, like, it's a your birth experience.
Yes.
And when I
Yes.
met with my midwife, she was like my husband was like, "How many babies have you delivered?" And she was like, "Well, none."
Yeah.
And my husband was like,
What?
yeah." And she was like, and then he was like, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah.
He was like, "Literally, like every single woman births
Does it
their
himself.
own baby. It is their birth. Like
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
like I am there to be like the assistant of this person delivering their
Sure.
baby, and
Sure.
I can be their coach and pushing. I can do all the things that they need,
Sure.
but I am not birthing or delivering the baby or
Right.
birthing the baby. Like
Right.
your wife is.
Yeah.
Like she is
Right.
going to be birthing
Right.
the baby. And it's so
Right.
much more just like empowering.
Wow.
And also the midwife that I chose, I was very big on like postpartum. Like she'll come and see me at my house like
Wow.
every other like 3 days after I give birth. And she helps because she's also a certified nurse. She helps with all of the stuff that's baby related, making sure that baby's taken care of, but also making sure I'm in a good spot.
Right. Right.
Which felt really great because I didn't really see my doctor at all in 6 weeks
No.
until like 6 weeks. And at that point, I was more just shocked because I was fine. But it was more just like, answering that survey, like, how's
It's
your
a
mental
survey.
health? Yeah,
Yeah.
the survey. And it was like, how's your mental health? And then he kind of told me, he was like, oh, I'm so glad that you're doing so well. And I was like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then he
And
was
you're
like,
like,
well,
huh?
like, if I'm being honest, like, the other girl across the hall is having a really hard time. And so I'm actually going to have to prescribe her depressants.
Yeah.
And that's probably about like 1 in 2 people at their 6 weeks
I'm
period.
sure.
And that made me just be like, wow.
Oh, it's
One in
insane.
two people that most doctors see basically fail this survey and are just given. And I'm not against antidepressants
Not at
or
all.
any of that kind of
No,
stuff. Not at all. I am very for it. But like, they just weren't given the proper support they needed in that first 6 weeks to
not at
really
all.
feel good in their own body. And so
Because
I
I
think,
mean, food is so important. Vitamins are so important. Supplements and you come from the background of the Confidence Co, which was your baby before your babies.
yeah.
Was gut health and gut wellness, and it was a vitamin, right? That helped with. Is that what you would call
Yeah,
it, a vitamin or
so it's great. It's actually something that I've been kind of parlaying into a lot of my postpartum and nutritional coaching, is that a lot of times we are nutrient deficient just
yes,
because we're rebuilding our gut
which
lining as we
causes so much
go.
hormone imbalance, which causes depression, which causes
Correct.
psychosis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so it actually parlays very well with that, which is why I felt really, really good about bridging the two. And so having that like as like a secret weapon for you when you're on your postpartum journey is like really helpful, kind of in rebuilding your gut lining and going through postpartum, knowing that you're actually getting the sufficient nutrients out of all the foods that you're actually eating.
yeah.
And there's so many other things that obviously, like, it's funny because I've been creating this whole guide, and then I add it to kind of like the annual membership. But how it kind of started was, I guess, just generally like
Yeah,
the grouping was I really wanted to have like community that like talked about specific instances in postpartum.
right.
And I found myself, no joke, at like a women's group, and I was just talking openly and raw, and I
Yeah.
started crying at this
Oh,
women's group. It was like a dinner, and everyone was just like, "Is she okay?" And I was
wow.
like, and it was like a mom's dinner, but they were like still kind of in like their own headspaces, didn't really kind of fully, and like 3 or 4 people were like talking to me afterwards, and they were like, oh my gosh, like we've been there, like whatever, really nice, really great. But it was definitely like more awkward, I think, when
Sure.
everything was happening than it
Yeah.
was not. And I was kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I thought this was like a group for moms, and I thought like we
Yeah.
were all going to be good here.
Right.
Um, but, like, and half of like, some of them were really fine with it. They were like, "Wow, like, you're just going through a lot. Seems like a really tough transitional period." And I was like, "I am, like, always been the strong one. Like, why is this, like why am I so emotional all the time?" And I kinda left in a way being like, "Wow, it was really great that, like, those 2 people, like, really felt for me and, like,
Yeah.
wanted to be there for me." And it was also really awkward that, like, and kinda icky that, like, a bunch of other people were like, "Oh, man, like, she's a founder of a business and she's really, like, she's really nosediving right now."
No, but
And
literally,
so
just so you know, I felt the same way. I've been in that situation where you literally word vomit, and some people are like, I've had beautiful births. Like, this is really weird. Like, you have problems, and you feel really strange, and you're like, oh, like, you want to have another baby because everything's okay. Like, that's crazy. Like, no, wow. So just so you know, you are not alone in that feeling at
totally.
all.
No, not at all. And but I knew that, which was great. And I was kind of like, oh man, like just like a few people who are kind of maybe not in the same course of like trajectory that you are can actually be semi-defeating and making you feel a little bit more vulnerable. So like,
Makes you feel
how
way
can you
worse.
cultivate yeah, how can you cultivate a group of people who are like looking to essentially have the same things that you want, like, which is
Sure.
community growth, like transformation, but also like openness and like raw and authenticity about all of those situations. And that's kind of what I wanted to cultivate when I started doing my
Mm.
postpartum groups is I would talk to women and I would just kind of evaluate like who they are, like what their openness is to certain things, and kind of be able to place people in kind of grouping systems and kind of lead the groups themselves into like an intimate group of like 6 to 6 people, which has typically been like kind of the group sizes. and like also giving them accountability partners with people that I think would match really well with them and their energies, and kind of transition into that kind of stuff. And it's like a 12-week group program, and the like feedback has been amazing. I have like
Wow.
videos, which I haven't even like posted or anything, of people like kind of talking about their experiences. Most people want to continue on.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened when I wanted to start like Circle. Um, on top of that was I want to give people, like, they've done like their 12 weeks. We can
Yeah.
continue meeting if you want, but like now I feel like you're in like a goodish place. Like let's enter more of like a larger community of like other people who have kind of
Right.
gone through it. And so it can be a little bit more it's like kind of like an after group,
Sure.
but people who also like are just curious and interested in the group itself can join that. And like I give like discounts for people like joining different groups. If they join that
Wow.
first, they'll have a discount to go into like the postpartum or the pregnancy groups. And if they join my postpartum groups, will have like a discount to go into like the like annual membership fee
Sure.
of like community.
But it's so
But
amazing what you're doing, because the thing is, you know, we just had your baby shower, and I was so lucky to be able to go and be a part
oh,
of
you're
that and
so
be
sweet.
included. It was so fun. But you know, something that everyone went around and kind of said a little bit about their love for you, or like a blessing,
I
you
know,
know,
and
and
that was
that
like
was
the
like,
mother's blessing. The
God,
mother's
it
blessing.
was,
I know. And if for people who don't know what a mother's blessing is, I wanted to do something a little bit different with my
yeah,
baby shower. Well, first of all, it was my second baby, and so I was kind of like hesitant
sure,
about even having a baby shower.
sure,
But my like support group around me was like, no, we really want to have one for you. And I was
yeah,
like, well, let's like do a little bit of like a different turn. Like, since I'm having a home birth, like let's make it a mother's blessing and have it be like a little bit more like ceremonial to like this
yes,
next phase and chapter. And I was kind of like, I feel like the group is going to be like really good and forthcoming on any of the specifics that like would kind of just um like I guess the whole goal is really to raise up the mom from like a like powerful like
sure. Like you
self-esteem
can do it.
standpoint to like you can do it,
Yeah.
to make them like really kind of feel like they are the most powerful authentic version of themselves when they're
Yeah.
going into their birth ceremony. And so Alessandra was so sweet, and she even contributed in the group, but
Oh.
everyone went around, and you can totally change. Sorry,
No,
you
I
can
mean,
totally.
no, no, no. I mean, but that, I'm so glad you explained what it is. Actually, a friend of mine is doing a mother's blessing coming up,
I
which
love
is
that.
so exciting. And I love, because it's her second. And it was the same sort of thing where she's doing it with her doula. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. Just small group. But what was so nice was, you know, everyone kind of went around and said these beautiful things about you. And I, of course, you know, have to swear because I have a potty mouth, and I'm like, Lexi's a badass. I'm like, you know, she showed up, like she was pumping. I remember on our first episode, like you were pumping right before, you were 15 minutes early, and I logged on. No one's ever early on the podcast. So I like log on, and you're like pumping. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And you're like, no, it's fine. Just got to finish this. Got to put the baby down. Got to do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, she really is doing it all. And I was so moved by that. But something that I didn't say, because you know, still I have this like mom brain fog. You know, you were such a huge help with me postpartum, and with bringing Lady out and wanting to, you know, start friendships like anew with people, because you were like, hey, come and meet me in Brentwood. Like, you know, get in the car, come, let's go get lunch, let's be with the babies. And I remember that was like the first time I really went on an adventure, and it was like a girl date. Like we had met virtually online a couple times, you know, and
Yep.
we had talked on the phone a lot, but we had never really, I think it was the first time we met in person. And I
Yeah.
just was like, oh my God, this was so lovely, because Lady was so little. And you were like, oh my gosh, it's going to be great. Like, this is what you do for here. This is what you do for that. And having that support system from someone, like you said, like where it was like somewhat of a stranger helping out, and me being able to be like, this is what I'm going through. Like, is this normal? Like,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. It was so like reassuring and so lovely, and just like a breath of fresh air. And I can't thank you enough for that, because truly,
Oh,
and
it's so
that's what,
sweet.
and you are doing that with so many other women. And I mean, there's a part of me, like I still consider Lady my newborn, and she's 20 months
She
old now.
is.
She is a
She'll
She'll
always
always
be
be
your
my
baby.
newborn. But I like think of this group, and I'm like, God, like I was so blessed to have been able to reach out to people like walking on the street who had newborns, reaching out to people who I had met through the podcast, like through like, other mutual friends, through our friend Britt Bronson, like shout out to Britt once again,
Yes,
like,
Brit.
people who come together in community because I had, I had one friend that had had a baby a year before and one friend that was giving birth around the same time as me, which was really lovely to have that one support system. But other than that, I didn't know anyone else. So to be able to open up and, gravitate towards these people or friends of mine who we were acquaintances, you become such a stronger bond with people. And I
Totally.
remember you were
Motherhood
like,
is the strongest bond.
it's the strongest bond. And I remember you're like, oh my gosh, you're going to meet this girl. She's your neighbor. Her name is Daniela. Like, she has a baby. Like,
Yes.
Violet, the cutest thing in the world. Like, you guys are going to be friends. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then just by chance, like, someone else in music class ran into her. They had the same stroller. She's like, I'm on my way to this music class. She's like, I want to come.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, Lexi? Like, and it's like, wow. And then such a close friendship. And I think that that's what motherhood is all about. It's about being vulnerable, being open, being yourself, and just being that raw person and meeting
Hmm.
other people and not being afraid to go and ask for help, ask for friendship
Absolutely.
help.
And to that exact point, one thing that I realized when there were people in that group who didn't feel didn't want like maybe my energies or whatever it
Sure.
was, my authenticity, it just made me realize like how many people are actually on their own healing journey. Like everyone who came to me was like, "Oh my God, like I've been like through that. I've been working on myself. I've been doing this and it's
Yeah.
so great that like I want to help you and like help you go through this, etc." Which was so nice. But then
Right.
there's the other people who like aren't necessarily willing or maybe like getting the right help and they're in their own like mess. And
Sure.
that's actually kind of like what it is. Like
Yes.
they are going through it, but they're not willing or open or able to get to that raw point yet to be able to have like those conversations that might
Right.
feel hard.
Right.
And so much of motherhood is being able to accept the fact that things are challenging and that you're
Yes.
going to become a different version of
Whew,
yourself. You're going
yeah,
to
you
shed
are.
all of your layers. And so whether it's through community or even I do a lot of like somatic therapies in like my groups too, which is like grounding or like certain types of self-expression, like people like to dance, people like to
Yeah.
do breath work or visualization, like all of those kinds of things that can just kind of give you some type of like mental framework and like reframe of
Yeah.
your brain
Yeah.
that like it's not just about like your baby and your
Sure.
partner. It is about you, and you need to start focusing on your own
Yeah.
personal transformation in this whole process and make time for yourself, whether it's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We can like slowly build up. But I always start like each session being like, thank you for choosing you. Like the reason why you are here in this group is because you decided and chose yourself.
Yeah.
And that's so important because
Oh,
that is the
so
first
important.
step in growth. And like you chose to give yourself community, you chose to give yourself an hour of time to dedicate to yourself. Like that is a huge accomplishment in itself, especially on your postpartum journey, because we just don't give ourselves that and we don't give
No.
ourselves the self-compassion that we need during that time frame. And
Yeah.
it's an ongoing journey. Like I had one girl call me the other day being like, I had a panic attack. I was like walking my kid. I was walking with my stroller and my dog. And I had a panic attack. And she's like, and all I could think about was like, do your breath work, sit down,
Oh,
like do my breath work. And she's like, and I did it and I was fine. She's like, but
wow.
I clearly over the last like few months have not been doing anything for myself and I need to
I've not
focus
been
on me.
fine.
And I'm like, you have the awareness though. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing. Like that
Yeah.
in itself is so awesome. And she does have a lot of other stuff going on, like small things add up in motherhood, 100%.
Sure.
And so you just don't know how you're going to feel in certain
Sure.
time frames.
Yeah.
And so, but I was like, I'm glad that you called me. Like, thank you for like calling me and telling me that this is going on and it's going to be better. And you're focusing on you. Like, what are like some small steps that you've decided that you can, because you actually do know all the answers at the end of the day. You're just
Yeah.
not giving yourself any kind of like mental space to be able to figure out what those answers are because you don't
Yeah.
have it.
No, no, you don't have
Um,
it. You don't have it. And that's
No.
why you have to ask for help, because other people might have it and they might be able to give you a little bit of advice that's really going to change the entire, outcome of how you treat your postpartum journey. Now, for
Yes.
those who are looking to join Circle, how do they join? And will it be available virtually as well? Is it virtually? Is it in person? How are you
Yeah,
doing it?
so basically, the groups themselves are virtual. I have people kind of all over the place currently. I
I'm
think that they're
sure.
kind of expanding. I think that like there will be there first of all are going to be in real life events. I already
Oh,
had my first one like a week or two ago, and it was great. Like six people came to a coffee shop. We all
oh,
chatted. They were all in different phases. One was about to have a baby like me. Another person was a year out, and it was just like people just wanted to share like their experiences with
sure.
each other versus, and it was much more of like a broader spectrum, which was very cool
Yeah.
for the in-person stuff. And then the virtual stuff, just because a lot of people are like, I think like some people joined this last session and they were like 10 weeks postpartum and they
Yeah.
just like
It's
wanted to have community. And I
yeah.
was like, that's great. Ended up being a much like earlier on group, and they all wanted to do virtual, and which was great. And we basically still meet, and they only have two more
Oh,
sessions left right now. And they're like, can we keep doing this? But I
oh,
know that you're gonna have a baby.
yeah. And they're like, no, you
And
have a
so like
moment. Yeah.
all of that like kind of is kind of what made me want to create like Circle, like the community, which is like the larger community versus just
Sure.
the smaller groups. And those can definitely be feeders into they will be feeders into like, more intimate groups, but
Right.
also gives you the chance to be like, is this for me? Like, I'm going to go to a real life event, and it's like obviously a much subsidized version since it's an annual fee.
Right.
Um, versus like our group stuff is like it's kind of like you're going to be like in a group, and it's like a organized like session
Yeah.
with a topic. But however, like sometimes the first 30 minutes of the group is people just being like, I can't figure out how to breastfeed my baby right now. Like, what are the resources? What can I do? Like, is anyone else having a similar experience? Or like one of the topics that we had covered was like, I literally like can't help but resent my husband right now just because I can't go back to my normal life, and he just
Yeah.
literally is 8 weeks going back to his job, and I'm just here
Yeah.
and I'm a walking milk cow. And like
Yeah.
those are totally normal conversations to have, and then just giving yourself self-compassion and realizing that there's other people who are in the group who are going through that same thing is just so helpful. um but the Circle like membership itself, the annual one, is basically like I'm gonna have Q&As and stuff like that on a monthly basis so everyone can
Sure.
join. And then we're gonna have in real life events, and you're gonna have like a bunch of resources, like
Oh,
stuff like meal plans, like things that are like really helpful, and then people can add their own stuff too that's helped them, so it's much more communal.
yeah. Oh,
um
I love
so anyways,
that.
that's kind of what that is. And then on top of that, the postpartum groups will start, and the pregnancy groups, which I've started now, which we talked about,
Yeah.
will start again in June once I have a little bit of time after this baby.
Oh my god.
So doing some signups for those currently. We already have a few people who are like already signed up for it, which is great.
Wow. Well,
So
I'm gonna have
I'll
all the
also be
links. So
postpartum then.
yeah, well, exactly. And you'll be going through it for a second time. So you'll have even more insights like into things that work, that don't work, that may not work the same that they did for Luca. Like that's what's so cool, right? It's like it's
Totally.
gonna be a totally different experience. That we're gonna have
Introducing
all the
second kids.
yeah, introducing second kids, something that I can't even wrap my brain around, and am not wrapping my brain around anytime soon, if ever, because I don't even know how you do it. Like this week was traumatizing enough for me with Lady. Like she was not having someone take her toy, and she's such a good sharer, and she's not sharing, and I'm like, but you were so good. What happened? What did I do that, and you always think like,
It
what did
totally
I do?
happens.
And it's like, no,
It
it's
totally happens. That's just like a stage, and they are mirrors of other kids. So maybe she saw another kid not sharing.
yeah.
My son says mine all the time right now. Just wait till they start saying, hi, mama, or like in their crib and they're just like, Mama, Mama. It's not like crying anymore. It's just like they know your name.
Yeah.
They want you to come get them. And I'm like, oh man, you little shit.
Yeah. Or how about when
You
they
know how to push my buttons.
Yes. Well, we still co-sleep with Lady, and now she has learned
Yeah.
to wake up in the middle of the night, and she'll wake up and she'll like look around and she'll go, Mama, Mama. And if I don't like respond in 1 second, she go, Mummy, Mummy. Like she has this accent, and I
I'm
go, yes.
dying.
And she
Wait,
goes,
what is her accent? Is
she,
it British?
she has a French and a British. We have no idea, like with certain words. She says, Mama, and then she'll go, Mummy, Mummy. And then she'll go, Chi Chi, Chi Chi, like, because she wants boob. And I'm like, oh my God. Mommy, Chi,
So
Mommy,
cute
Chi. And you're
though.
just like, what is this accent? Who is this person? Like, she's such an old lady. Like, she's so funny.
No, she's perfect. I honestly think so. And if she's your child, she's absolutely perfect.
She's a good time.
But
She's a Gemini like her
she's a
mom.
good
She's a
time.
good
But it
time.
is really funny how they pick up funny things like that. Like, for example, my son says big bird, like as if
What?
he's British. And I'm like, how
How do you
did you
know
decide his
that?
name is Big Bird? Like not Big Bird. I'm
No,
like,
big bed.
yeah, my husband and I laugh at it all the time. I'm just
Oh, I
like,
can't. Like, where
oh,
does it come from? Right?
like where what was that? Maybe like a previous life? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe they were British in a past life, like roaming the Tower of London. I don't know. Like who knows what those two like. Those two
I
kooks, like I love them so much.
so
They're
funny.
just so
I
nuts. Well, Lexi, I'm going to ask my final question for you.
Yes, please talk
What
to me.
is your emotional support?
Oh, my emotional support. Let's see. I have a lot of emotional support right now, so
Yeah.
that's been really great. I've
Good.
been really happy about like creating my emotional registry
Yeah.
for my second baby. And
Oh,
so I would say I don't have just like one thing. I've
yeah.
actually been creating like at least cultivating like 5 people that I can reach out
Yeah,
to and like
that's
being
great.
very descriptive on how they can help me. And so my emotional support is like my emotional registry that hopefully will come into play for my postpartum group. But like those
Yeah.
people still now like are doing their parts. But I do think that it's like the emotional registry should apply to not just postpartum moms or pregnant moms. It
Yeah.
should be to everyone. Like
Yeah.
who are like, and maybe it's a good reflection question for like who are like your core people that you can turn to and feel like there's no judgment and they will do whatever it is that you need to be able to go like to do like the hard things in life, which is
Yeah.
definitely motherhood. So I would say that my core 5, like that's them. And
Oh,
like, yeah. And so, and like one of those is actually like my communities too. Like I really
yeah.
think that for me, like giving back and having those communities have actually just been so much
Sure.
more fulfilling for me.
Yeah.
And it's funny, someone asked me the other day, like, is it exhausting like leading them now? Like just because I'm so
Yeah.
pregnant. And I'm like, honestly, like I'm like could be exhausted, but I'm so much more revitalized by each of the conversations because I know that it's helping you guys and in some way it's also helping me
You need
tremendously
it.
too
Yeah.
because I'm going to be going through it too. I'm going to be having the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same emotions, the same hormones.
Yeah.
And even though it is different from an experience standpoint for everyone, we're all kind of in it together.
Sure.
So,
Sure. No, and
yeah.
and I understand that it's like I mean mine is very different than yours, but I was doing the podcast up until I think right when I gave birth, and I did my first podcast episode with Dr. Berlin. I went on
Oh,
his
he's
podcast. I think
amazing.
it was like 1 week postpartum, and I don't even remember anything that I said or what I did or any of it, like to be honest with you. But I'm so glad I did because now I can go back and listen and be like, oh my God, I can't believe like that happened. Like I don't remember that. But there is something that's so invigorating about hearing other women and other support systems and making you feel like, wow, I got this. It
Yeah.
pumps you up. Like I leave. Yeah, I was just talking to this girl, Liz Moody, and we did her interview like 3 days ago on the podcast,
Awesome.
and it was really fun because she was just talking about how she gets so buzzed after having great conversations with people. And I'm like,
Totally.
yeah, you know what? When I'm on the podcast and I have great conversations with people, I was like, I feel like I got this day. Like that's why
Yeah.
I do them in the morning
Totally.
it helps because my mom can watch Lady at that time, but also like I do it in the morning now because it sets an intention for my day and it gets me going. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. Like I can handle this. I can do all this. Like, let's go for it, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel buzzed.
I love
So
that.
I love it. So well, I love you so much, Lexi,
I
and
love
I'm
you
so
too.
excited. And I can't wait for baby number 2. We're gonna have the
Me too.
link to all the circle stuff at the bottom. And I'm
Amazing.
sure you're gonna have so many mamas that are gonna sign up.
Oh, I'm so
And I
excited.
can't
And
wait
I
for
want you
that.
to join too.
I know I will totally come
I'm gonna get
and
you.
join and or speak, you know, one time, whatever
Yes.
you want. Like I would love to.
Love that. I would love
Totally
that.
here for that. I love you.